Russia has launched another deadly strike on Kyiv. The whole city was under attack from drones and missiles. Today, Ukraine is mourning, and yet, after the Alaska summit earlier this month, the war seems no closer to ending, not an inch closer to peace. To help us understand the bigger picture, I'm joined by Stanislav Belkovsky, political analyst and a sharp critic of Putin's regime. He's with me now to explore what the strikes mean for Ukraine, for Donald Trump's diplomacy, and for Europe's security. Stanislav, welcome to the studio.
Thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Stanislav, we've just seen one of the deadliest attacks in Kyiv in weeks. And today we have a mourning day to dozens killed, and all this after the Alaska summit, which brought no progress, to be honest. Haven't we simply stayed in the same place from where Donald Trump has started, actually?
Now, at least we understand what's going on, and the positions of all parties involved in this bloody war, directly or indirectly, are quite clear and blunt. Maybe this is the advantage we've got during the past several weeks. The position of Vladimir Putin is to conduct the war further, to lead Ukraine to the very hard stage of attrition and exhaustion, presumably in coming 2-3 months, and to make Ukraine for some kind of semi-surrender, for negotiations on the terms proposed by Vladimir Putin in Alaska and delivered through Donald Trump. Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, of course, is prepared for the war according to Napoleon Bonaparte principle that the war is not lost until we go on, and until we are fighting. Keep fighting. There's a basic principle, and this fighting creates some hopes, a source of hopes that something could be changed on the battlefields in favor of Ukraine. The position of Europe is that Europe has understood his basic life task for the coming years, for midterm perspective of European existence. This is a preparation for a big war with Russia. Regardless of how imminent this war is, Europe has stipulated, European elites have stipulated they are preparing themselves for this war, and this means a wide and profound militarization of majority of European life spheres. And Ukraine is considered as the only country geographically placed in Europe which has been prepared for the large war, full-scale war with Russia, against Russia, and has proved it for the past 3 years and a half. No country of Europe could prove it by itself. And Europe psychologically is still unprepared for getting back to military times, to the dark times of the past, because one of the basic idea of European Union is there is no more wars in Europe, on European soil. Of course, when Vladimir Putin asked then German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in early 2022, several weeks before the full-scale invasion, would you consider the war in Yugoslavia in 1999 as a war on European soil? This question was quite reasonable, I think. Yes, Europe pretended to ignore the events in Yugoslavia as a war on its soil. And maybe now Europe is starting to realize what the mistake had been done 25 years ago. But still, the European elites, European leaders, are psychologically very deeply dependent on Washington and America's leadership. Because though the America-centered world does not exist anymore, and Donald Trump reflects, he does not create it. He did not create it, but he reflects this historical trend. Europe still cannot believe in it fully, 100%. And is preparing, Europe is preparing to act on its own in security and other questions, but still is oriented on Washington's position and striving to get any consensus about principal issues concerning European security and more broadly European destiny. And finally, the US and Donald Trump. Donald Trump, of course, would like to get rid of the burden of this war, which he insists more and more frequently in the past weeks is Joe Biden's war, not his. And he insists he has put stop to 6 or 7 wars. He's going to he's willing to get the Nobel Prize, which would be proclaimed on the 10th of October. And we could be afraid that if Donald Trump is not Nobel Prize winner this year, some sanctions could be imposed against Norway. At least Trump's close ally, who proved to be a golf player recently, American Senator Lindsey Graham already threatens Norway with sanctions. Formally, this is connected not with Nobel Prize for Trump, but with Norway's sovereign fund politics toward Israeli corporations and Caterpillar, American car producer. But still, there's a hint that if a Norwegian Nobel Committee does not decide it in favor of Donald Trump, anything and everything could happen in the sanctions field. But at the same time, Donald Trump promised to a considerable part of his constituents and considerable part of Republican elites, though now being under transformation from old school Republican elites from the times of great old party GOP to Trump era elites, but still being very critical of Russia's Vladimir Putin and its military machine. He promised to put stop to the war, to end this war, first in 24 hours, which, as Kit Kellogg, Trump's special envoy, emphasized, are never determined when those 24 hours really start. Maybe this term has not started yet. And then for 100 days through Kit Kellogg and Stephen Witkoff. And now so he cannot get rid of this problem as easy as he wanted to. That's why he's trying to provide, to create conditions for ceasefire on any conditions. Just to tell, there is ceasefire, regardless of the conditions, which would inevitably mean considerable successions from both parts, Russia and Ukraine. He has fulfilled his promise. There is peace. All the rest is a problem of Europe and European security, and America is no more in charge of European security as it has been for the past decades.
Yes, when you mentioned, Stanislav, 10th of October, it's the day where the Nobel Prize announcement?
Yes, on the 10th of October.
Oh, yeah.
The Nobel Committee should name the new laureate.
Yes.
The
So I'm just, maybe that's why we've heard from some of the American diplomats that the war should end by the end of the 2025.
There were numerous assessments on when and how the war. The first term was 100 days from Trump's inauguration. Then there was a forecast for armistice on the Easter, common Easter of Orthodox Catholics and Protestants, which happened on 20th of April this year. Then it was by the end of first half of the year. So I don't think such we could get any responsible forecast with regard to terms.
Yeah, understood. But what do you think after the meeting in Alaska? How much damage did Donald Trump suffer to his own image?
Internationally, to a certain extent, yes. But I'm afraid Donald Trump does not perceive it such. For him, of course, the primary goal is to increase his popularity in America, in his own country. And the MAGA, Make America Great Again, isolationist wing of his supporters is very eager to make America out of the conflict. Even Ukraine would be sacrificed to Putin's Russia. And even if there is no more any kind of alliance between US and European Union, which is object of numerous suspicious and even sometimes hatred by this MAGA isolationist camp. Some other Trump supporters still do think that Trump should bring peace to the diversity of the world's regions, including Europe, as he promised to. But now Trump is attracting attention to his efforts in fighting criminal immigration, fighting against criminal circles in Washington and other top cities in America and so on. Trump understands that any questions of international politics have never been so important, so crucial for America's constituents, and especially his Trumpist constituents, for ages, if compared with internal problems of America. And that's why, next, he does perceive himself as a peacemaker and deal maker in the Middle East and many other conflicts, for instance, between India and Pakistan, Rwanda and Congo, Azerbaijan and Armenia. As a creator of different formats like TRIP, Trump Road for International Peace and Prosperity, formerly and now known as Zangezur or Sunik Corridor between Azerbaijan and its Nakhichevan exclave. So Trump has many things to be done, and in his opinion, he has resolved almost all problems with regard to his peace efforts, as he promised before, even before he got back to White House, Oval Office. That's why he would improve the impression that either the war in Ukraine is not so important for America and himself, because it's a European problem, and as Trump creates an impression now, he repeats every time that if he would be president in 2022, there would be no such war. And and the politics of Joe Biden and European allies of America at the time led to this war, and so on and so forth. So it is not so much responsible, and he's still perceiving himself as the greatest of all times, as the most prominent leader, at least at this epoch. He tries to create an impression that if there is no real success in bringing peace to Ukraine, it's not his problem. And the list of his problem, it's somewhere very low.
Yes, Stanislav, but if MAGA is so eager to take themselves out from the Russian war in Ukraine, why do Trump then haven't done something like with Azerbaijan and Armenia, but instead he just putting a red carpet in front of Putin? And he seemed keen to present Putin as his equal while treating Zelensky absolutely differently.
Mm-hmm. Because MAGA is not the constituents of Trump does not consist of MAGA only.
Yeah.
Yes, there are different groups which supported Trump at the 2024 elections, including the people who wanted to improve the global role of America, and they voted for Trump not because of any isolationist trends, but because of necessity to fight this agendas of many genders and so on and so forth. Many Christians voted for Donald Trump because even not being considered as a real Christian, genuine Christian, Donald Trump is perceived as a leader who improves the conditions for Christianity in America, and to a certain extent it's true. To a very considerable extent, it's true. There are different groups who support Trump, and some of them are still eager to show America's role as peacekeeper and moderator in different regions of the world. But here we meet the personal ambitions of Donald Trump, who is not just going to become Nobel Prize winner. If he doesn't get Nobel Prize this year, he would say us, of course, that this was too small time for him to become just a Nobel Prize winner, because Nobel Prize, many people who are quite not equal to Donald Trump have been awarded by Nobel Prize at different times and epochs. He would say that he's a global leader, global peacekeeper, global peace bringer, and it's his personal self-perception, which is much more important for him. This idea of becoming the greatest of all times, that any obligations towards the constituents and any views of different groups of the constituents. That's why Donald Trump hasn't ceased to act on this in this direction yet. At the same time, he's very interested and does not even conceal it, that in some business pact with Vladimir Putin, and interested in Russia's natural resources, first of all, necessary for at this very stage of technological revolution, including artificial intelligence development like rare earths, metals, lithium, and so on. He's interested in Russian Arctics and Northern Sea route, and so on and so on. And he needs preconditions to go on with this business pact. And he realizes that without ceasefire in Ukraine, without bringing at least temporary peace to Ukraine, he cannot be so free in his business negotiations and his business communications with the Russian dictator. That's why he's still involved, though being annoyed by inefficiency of his own efforts.
Yeah, but still, how on earth he can rely on any Nobel Peace Prize when after yesterday's deadly attack on Kyiv, it's out of any logic?
No, he pretends to be Nobel Prize winner because, in his opinion, many results in different parts of the world.
Okay.
Yes, and he was introduced by many countries, as we know, including
the number,
Armenia,
yes.
Azerbaijan, for instance, Pakistan, and so on and so forth. That's why he's striving to decrease the importance of Ukrainian case in the war in Europe, and to show that first, it's not his war. Secondly, it's a sphere of European responsibility, and European allies should not rely anymore on the total role of America in such questions. That's why. But nonetheless, he would try to do something. Yes, to bring peace. But with the passage of time, meeting his inefficiency, understanding or trying to avoid the understanding that Vladimir Putin is still going for the aim, the basic goal of Vladimir Putin is not just a compromise of Ukraine, but the surrender of Ukraine in different forms, not in the battlefields only, but the political surrender, the transformation of Ukraine into Putin's Russia, Putin's autocracy satellite. Putin would go on and further regardless of any negotiations with Trump and mutual obligations that could stem from those negotiations. Trump, to a certain extent, understands it. And at least Stephen Witkoff, who conducts confidential negotiations with Vladimir Putin, and as we know now doesn't use the State Department officials at those negotiations because some aspects of his talks with Vladimir Putin are too delicate, concerning some cash maybe or some incomes, some multi-billion incomes from their potential future cooperation, which should not be disclosed to anybody, even to America's officials. Yeah? So when Witkoff improves Trump's perception on that we can reach some pact with Vladimir Putin, if needed some later, but not be 100% dependent on the Ukrainian march of events.
As one of the international journalists said that Trump has long shown his love for flattery. And Ukraine, of course, has also tried this tactic. You know that. How has Kyiv actually gained anything by flattering American president?
Of course, Vladimir Zelensky has changed himself and his approach to Donald Trump. After this incident of 28th of February, when he was so outspoken and sincere with American president, which of course was very met by Donald Trump and his team very angrily. But Vladimir Zelensky is a democratic leader who should be decent in many senses of this word toward Ukrainian people, toward European partners, and so on and so forth, cannot compete in flattery toward Trump with Vladimir Putin. Because Vladimir Putin has no restrictions. He can tell Trump anything and everything, from yes, there would be no war if you were at White House in 2022 till you won undoubtedly the elections in 2020, and the American deep state has deceived American people by this postal vote system. Yes? Vladimir Putin can afford to say so because he is a dictator. Being out of any democratical framework. Vladimir Zelensky cannot afford to say that Joe Biden has been a legitimate president of America. That's why in this competition, Vladimir Putin has inevitable advantages over Ukrainian president.
Yeah, unfortunately. And also Russia continues to push these, unacceptable demands. Donbass, no NATO, questioning Zelensky legitimacy, that was a few days ago. And if Ukraine, Stanislav, just hypothetically, agreed to all of this, what would Moscow ask for more, for next?
The final goal of Vladimir Putin, and he could sacrifice the rest of his period in power to achieve it, is to get pro-Moscow government in Kyiv forever. He is basing on former scenarios, which he finds successful, like Chechen scenario, when after the war between Russia and Chechnya in the second half of 1990s, Putin has created the pro-Moscow power in Grozny. And though Chechnya is a matter-of-fact independent state, rather than an inalienable component of Russia's political and law space. But formally, Ramzan Kadyrov and his clan are 100% subject to Vladimir Putin, and they pray to him. He's a pagan god for Ramzan Kadyrov. Or a Georgian scenario, and after Mikhail Saakashvili's epoch, after the war of 2008, Kremlin supported a new force, which having formally no close connections to Moscow. And let's remember that Georgia and Russia still do not have diplomatic relations. But nonetheless, the power in Belarus is quite loyal to Kremlin.
Absolutely.
And is so loyal that even can put at risk Georgia's relationship with the European Union and prospects of Euro integration of Georgia, which could hardly be believable just 5-7 years ago. So Putin wants to accomplish the similar scenario in Ukraine and would go for it many years if necessary, because the key resource, in his opinion, which he has in abundance, contrary to any of his colleagues, opponents, enemies, and so on, is time. He has no democratic elections. He can easily be in power by 2036, of course, if he is alive. And even furthermore, he would invent the method how to stay in power after this red line. And so he can wait. As he waited for Georgia to be turned from anti-Russia to Russia's ally, like he waited for the solution in Chechnya. So, and regardless of the conditions of the ceasefire in 2025, for instance, or in coming months, Putin will still go on with this. And Europe, there is no hope that it would motivate Donald Trump to change his position dramatically toward Ukraine and big war in Europe at all. But Europe, of course, should realize it. And if Europe is preparing itself for the big war of Russia, and it's becoming raison d'etre, the sense of existence of European Union. So Europe should make its principal decisions basing on this understanding.
So, as I'm assuming, there won't be any meeting possible between Zelensky and Putin.
No, it was impossible from the very beginning. Even if Putin has told something on it in Alaska, during the meeting in Alaska, he was either bluffing or meaning that, of course, he's quite prepared for a meeting with Vladimir Zelensky to accept Ukrainian surrender or semi-surrender on the conditions beforehand unacceptable for Ukraine and Zelensky. Now, the Putin scenario, as far as we can understand it, is to get some principal successes on the battlefield in coming months, to bring Ukraine to such a level of attrition and exhaustion that some principal conditions of Putin could be met, And then, since Vladimir Zelensky could never accept such even semi-surrender conditions, he would have to step down and be replaced by some provisional president elected by the parliament, by the Verkhovna Rada, who could go for such semi-surrender negotiations with Putin. This was Putin's plan and Putin's hope.
Yes, Stanislav, I'm just reading the fresh article from Reuters, and I want you to comment on that. They are saying that Steve Witkoff made a major mistake in Moscow, and the US special envoy, a property developer with no diplomatic background, met Putin on August 6th, and later Donald Trump and the Kremlin was ready to make major territorial concessions to end the war in Ukraine. And according to journalists, Witkoff then briefed European leaders that Putin was prepared to withdraw from Zaporizhia and Kherson, I do remember that, in exchange for the withdrawal of forces from Donetsk and Luhansk. The claim shocked many Europeans because they didn't expect that from a Russian dictator. And then, very next day, Witkoff changed his account, saying Putin had no actually offer to leave those regions, but merely hinted at lesser concessions, such as not demanding the West's formal recognition of them as a part of Russia. So how is that even possible happening like this?
No, because Steven Witkoff is Trump's special envoy on delicate business matters.
Yes.
He doesn't need American officials along, because he discusses some very... Yeah, it's not a mistake.
Okay.
It's a principal position, because one of the basic tasks of Steven Witkoff is to avoid any leaks, information leaks, on what is really discussed with Vladimir Putin and Witkoff's counterpart Kirill Dmitriev being in charge of those delicate business matters from Russian side, from Kremlin side. So they discuss something about big money. We remember that when Joseph Blatter, the former president of FIFA, International Football Union, has come to Russia to discuss the conditions of how to grant the World Football Championship to Russia. There were two meeting participants, Joseph Blatter and his Russian colleague Vitaly Mulko, who headed the Russian sports ministry at that moment. And the third person was an interpreter who translated the conversation from German into Russian and vice versa. And who was this interpreter? This interpreter was personally President Putin, because they could not trust anybody to get such information on what are the conditions, what are the secret business conditions of this. So with kickbacks and everything alike. That's the same format as in communication between Putin and Steven Witkoff. And Steven Witkoff, as far as we understand his position, is quite convinced that America and Donald Trump personally, and he, Witkoff himself, as a junior business partner of Trump, are mainly interested in business pact with Putin. And if and when they can forget about Ukrainian war, they would be completely happy about that. Misfortunately, they cannot. But they should do everything to create just an illusion. They have brought something like peace to Ukraine and Europe to get the free way for those delicate negotiations and large business projects with Putin and business circles around Putin.
Okay, now it's more understandable. And finally, after more than 3 years of Russian full-scale invasion, what looks for you more realistic? Defeating Russian military or still exhausting its economy until the Kremlin is forced to stop?
I don't see any presumptions, any preconditions for Russian military defeat in coming years. Of course, Russia's economy suffers from this war to a very considerable extent. But for Vladimir Putin is not so vulnerable to it. He's not sensitive to it. For him to resolve the Ukrainian question, the final solution of Ukrainian problem, I use Nazi terms on that, the final solution of Jewish problem, yes, as you remember, from 1940s. So it's much more important than anything and everything. And he could put at risk even his business pact with Trump. But Ukraine first. Putin is convinced that if he would not reach Ukrainian surrender first, he would never get back to this question in the future, to this matter in the future, and this would be his principal and basic historical mistake, like some of his predecessors, Russian emperors, sacrificed their priority goals, like, for instance, taking Constantinople in 1878, just to satisfy the Western partners. And after that, Russia could never get back to those questions, which was very painful. Because Putin is very motivated by history. He's a human of such retrotopic kind of mentality who lives in the past like in the present. There's no difference. And he can change the past. And he can find any pretext and any explanations of his modern politics and the deep past. So that's why he would fight Ukraine to the utmost, regardless of any obstacles and problems he encounters, despite the only only field where Vladimir Putin is really very sensitive is the field of his personal security. And if Putin's opponents, Putin's enemies in Europe and America and Ukraine, anywhere else, could create some framework of penetrating into the Putin's personal security system, this would be an efficient mechanism to impact his position.
I see. Stanislav, thank you for dedicating your time for us, and hope to see you
next week.
next
Thank you very
week.
much for the invitation. Entirely at your disposal. Thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
See you.